podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the How to Be Rich podcast, rich in health, wealth, and everything else dealing with the self. My name is Tyrone Thomas, and today I'm with Ty Thomas, my dad. How you doing today?
I'm very good. DJ Fife in the building, a.k.a. Ty Thomas, property owner, manager. Let's get it.
Yeah. So, first of all, tell people a little bit about your background, like where you're from, and like what you do.
Born and raised South Minneapolis, grew up there most of my life. I've traveled a lot, so I've got a lot of different experiences. But, from there, went to Mankato State, Minnesota, graduated, English degree, minor in business law. Used to write contracts for my DJ business. Worked with a lot of celebrities in regards to that. Transitioned to corporate America. Continued the DJ business for quite some time. Got into coaching. Love coaching and youth sports, coaching my boys and my daughter. And then eventually found a way to make money doing that with my 7on7 and my hoops and some of the companies that I own.
Yeah, and we'll get into all that stuff. So Thank you for coming on the podcast. Appreciate you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's a risk having me on here. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, you watched the one podcast, number 25, with me and Deontay and Javen. So, and I know you said you had some get back.
We had to do the rebuttal podcast for that one. No.
Yeah. So
no, I thought you guys did well. I'm proud of you guys, all you guys. Like, you guys did a good job, and I'm proud of who you've become and the man you become. So, no complaints on my end.
Cool. So, speaking about corporate America, you said you graduated from Mankato State. And then what was like your first job entering like the job scene?
My first job, I got recruited right out of college to work for Walmart. First as assistant store manager, kind of while I was in college. So they're kind of training me up while I was in college. And then I transitioned to like a business analyst in Bentonville, Arkansas for a short period of time. The culture was a little different from me, so I didn't last very long. But that's kind of how things started with corporate.
Gotcha. And then you went on to work for Target after that?
Yep. So, that was a critical time in my life because my brother had got sick. He had some seizures, and I felt it was important that I be close to home and family and things of that nature. So Target was the next big option. Obviously, they were willing to have me doing something very similar because it's two mass retail companies competing against each other. So I had the skill sets and the knowledge. So I came back, worked for Target, worked there for most of my career, almost 10 years, worked my way through the ladders and whatnot. And then, the funny thing about Target is that's also where I found my love for managing sports programs. Most people at Target know me as like a recruiter for sports teams because I ran the race club, the run club. I was like the sports commissioner of Target, all 5,000 employees, to kind of put it in context. All these different programs.
Did you do like the flag football stuff for them?
Flag football, our Target Hoops, which I negotiated a deal with Lifetime to put us on the platform as a Target Hoops platform. So they did stats for us and things like that. We did interviews. So it was super cool. Like I did some cool stuff there.
Nice. And so you were the first person in your family to go to college. How did you make that decision in doing that?
Just growing up, just my own individual instincts had a different outlook on life. I saw a repeating cycle in my family of, a lot of negative things we're not too happy about, having babies at a young age, people going to jail, and just some of the common things you hear about today. And I really wanted to break this cycle. So I had to look for examples outside of my family to have an example to kind of what I wanted to do next with my family, with myself. So that's kind of led me in the direction I am today.
Was college difficult for you?
No.
Like passing classes and stuff like that? I thought you told me that it took you like 7 years to graduate or something like that.
It did, because of everything else I had going on. So I wasn't just a college student. I was a business owner. I was an entrepreneur. I was traveling, doing DJ parties all over the country. Like I was trying to be on MTV. That was my priority. Played football for a short period of time. So I had a lot going on in college.
Yeah.
So it took me some time to figure out what I wanted to do, and then I buckled down and finished.
Gotcha. And so you were a DJ. Was that your first like entrepreneurial business?
That was my first business. Started when I was in high school, carried on into college, carried on after college. But it got huge in college. Like, I started with parties with like 500 people, then it went up to like 1,000, then 1,200, 1,500 people at an event.
Yeah.
And I do like 8 major events a year. So I was actually had money in college. So a lot of college kids struggle with money, but I had this income that was like all mine in college. So I was able to do things differently.
Where did you even get the like idea to start a DJ business? Like, how did that start?
I had to give credit to my Uncle Greg. He brought home a mixer one day, a DJ mixer. I don't know where he got it from or what, but we were at the house and he brought this mixer home. And I was like, what do you do with this? So I started experimenting with it. I didn't even have turntables. I had a CD player and a tape deck. I put the CD player and the tape deck into the mixer, and I'm mixing back and forth with those at the house. So that's how the high school party started. And I learned how to kind of, the mixer or the tape deck had pitch control on it too. So I could slow it down, speed it up. Like, it was pretty nice. It was just a home stereo system, and I just made it into a DJ system.
Gotcha.
So my Uncle Greg brought home the mixer, and that's how I got started.
Yeah. And then, like, how would you get like paid for these type of like DJ events and stuff like that? Would it be at door or?
Yep.
Drinks
so
or?
I, kind of at my peak, I always negotiated a percentage of the door and a percentage of the bar.
Okay.
So my draw was so strong, like my own fan base is so strong, I could go anywhere in the state and just throw an event and move their regular house DJ out for a night, and I'd throw a DJ Fife party, and it'd be huge, and I'd have all these followers that follow me everywhere I went. Before the social media followers and all that stuff, I had real fans that followed me around.
So people would follow wherever your parties would go, and they would go to those parties?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then you would get paid from people who would pay like some entry and then
entry fee, and then sometimes I can negotiate a percentage of the alcohol sales as well.
Okay.
Because I bought in, people were selling out of alcohol on my event nights.
Yeah.
So
like, how much would you make from like a big event? Would you
like
say
2,500, 3,000.
2,500, 3,000 an
Yeah.
event? Dang.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So
Really good for college. That's really good.
yeah, for me at that time, that was good.
Yeah. Cool. And yeah. So let's bounce back to like corporate America. So you worked at Target for 10 years, and then after that, did you go to US Bank, I think?
So no, after Target, my mentor became director of talent acquisition at Ecolab, and brought me over to Ecolab with him, which was a great experience. Learned a lot there, and then from Ecolab, I met one of my other mentors. He worked at US Bank, and he kind of like said, "Hey, we got this new opportunity, recruiting excellence team. You'll be a diversity recruiter, things of that nature." And I decided to go to US Bank. He said, "You'll get a call the next day," and I got that call, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I decided to go to US Bank, which at that point I was ready just to go run my businesses full time. But I got the call, and I was like, wow, this is great. And I was able to do that. It was a work from home type job. Well, I go in the office 2 days a week, which was unheard of because this was all pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So I was able to go in, twice a week and be home 3 days out of the week.
Yeah.
And it was super easy. And it was a passion of mine. Diversity recruiting is a passion of mine, helping people find their career jobs, help them navigate through the corporate structure, the tricks and, the tips and tricks to get through the interview process. So all that stuff is passionate of mine as well. So
nice. And at US Bank, like, or even just in corporate America, like, I assume you've experienced some difficulties and racism and things like that. And I remember one particular instance where I don't even know I kind of forgot the full story, but it was crazy because you had came home and you had like the recording because you were like, I remember you saying that this happens to a lot of like diverse people in these type of large corporations, and even just minority people groups where like they'll try and get you in certain ways. And there was this one instance with US Bank where you probably could tell the story better than I could, but
yeah,
like you got basically someone called you into a meeting and then she walked out of the meeting room and then left you there with someone on the phone or something? Or?
Yeah, it was a completely like setup. Like it was a setup. We won't say where, who, but I got set up to where, you know, when they decide they don't really want you in the company or whatever, they try and figure ways to push you out. So I got set up by, like, they tried to frame me and said I did some fraud or something like that. And, you know, my manager at the time kind of like set up a fake meeting and told me it was a strategy meeting, go to the meeting. And I went in the meeting, I walked in, and it was a setup. It was like an HR person and then this fraud detective on the phone or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, and they sat me down, just started grilling me with questions, and I didn't know what they were talking about or what it was about. Like, I was completely caught off guard, confused. Yeah. But luckily I had the wherewithal to kind of, you know, settle down and kind of understand what it is they were getting at and ask the questions. Yeah. Apparently they thought I had misrepresented my funds to get a loan or something. Mm-hmm. I got denied for the loan, which shouldn't have happened to begin with, but they said I told them a certain amount of money, which I don't tell banks to get approved for a loan. I clearly stated that I show you the document, my tax returns and my information so you can see how much money I make. Then you and the underwriters determine whether or not I get approved for the loan or not. Like, right. I don't need to tell you how much money I make. Yeah. You need to verify that. Exactly. So I was like, isn't that standard practice? I've never just been able to walk in the bank and tell somebody I make this much and get a loan. Right. Like, it's crazy to me. But they tried to convince me that I told someone that I made a certain amount of money, which I didn't. And I was like, we make more than that anyway, but you know, it didn't make sense to me, but yeah. It was like a setup. So that didn't actually work, and they tried to figure out a different way to set me up with some different stuff later, like a week later. That's crazy. So,
and then did you just end up quitting? Or?
Yeah, I just ended up quitting because I was like, I ain't got time for this. So yeah. So yeah, it was just an unfortunate situation, but you know, luckily I didn't allow them to set me up. So they were trying to, you know, I was like, okay, I see what's going on here. You guys are just making up stuff to get me out or whatever. So I decided just to step away. Yeah. So,
and then is that like, do you feel like you've experienced things like that throughout your entire?
Oh yeah. There's definitely, you know, just like there is in the world, you know, there's just you know, common things, you know, minorities have to go through, especially in the corporate space or when you're trying to be successful and climb a corporate ladder. There's all these little weird things that people don't get, even going through an interview. So I'll speak to the interview process since I'm in HR on how there's rules in place where you have to be compliant, especially if you're hiring, you have government contracts or whatnot, you have to be compliant and equal with your hiring practices. So if anybody applies, you have to actually interview them to a certain extent. You can't just say, oh, my buddy applied, somebody's friend, and pluck them to the front of the list. Right. You have to go through everybody. But you'd be amazed at how much relationships help people get hired.
And I remember you told me that for like the recruiting process, right? Because HR is basically you just recruit people for certain jobs and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. And you told me that the way that they were doing the diversity hires at U.S. Bank was they would Google search. Hold on. The way they were doing the diversity hiring at U.S. Bank was they would Google search a list of the top 10 like most popular like Asian names or African American names, and then they would go to like
LinkedIn and put that in the keyword search to see what pulls up. And I was completely mind boggled by that. Like, that was just crazy to me. Like, and these are supposed to be the top recruiters at this company. Right. And when I challenged that theory, they started looking at me crazy. Like, no, that's completely incorrect. Like, you never, like, so we have these things called Boolean searches. So there's a way to do Boolean searches, strings, to kind of filter out certain people and skill sets and whatnot. So I was like, to get diverse talent, just do a Boolean string on all the HBCU, historically black colleges in America. Right. Put that in your string and you'll pull in data. Then you can add the key skill sets to go with it and find the data. They didn't like my way. They liked the other way. So I was like, you're missing so much talent by most common Asian names, putting 10 of them in, and that's it. Like, do you know how much talent you're missing by doing that? But
Yeah, and that's like kind of racist.
Exactly. Like, yeah.
That's
Like
crazy.
that doesn't even make sense to me. But
yeah, that's funny.
yeah, I'll never forget like this so-called recruiter they had as a top recruiter. Like, so I was on a special project for this company, and only like 8 recruiters got selected to be on this project to save the company millions of dollars and do a high-level executive recruiting search.
Yeah.
For like 6 positions. Out of all those recruiters, I got 3 of the hires. Someone else had 1, some had none. But I got 3 out of 6, and I don't even think they had the last couple hired by the time deadline. We had to hire in 3 months. In that 3 months time, I got 3 of them, all high level, diverse, black female, Hispanic male, and a white male, which had a diverse mind of thinking, diverse thought. And that was it. And they still didn't want to, I got some awards and whatnot, but they still kind of looked at me sideways because my methodology in going about recruiting, I'm really particular about. And I do some research to kind of set me apart from other recruiters.
Yeah.
They didn't want to hear anything that I was doing. They thought this one white female recruiter, she was the top recruiter because she did searches on LinkedIn. LinkedIn calculates your data. You can see how many searches you do, how many people you talk to. There's a bunch of data, but to me, that's counterproductive. I do the initial Boolean search, the research, the keywords, and I strategically search to where it pulls in the top talent right away.
Yeah.
I don't have to waste time doing blind searches that pull in thousands of people all the time. I do strategic searches so I get what I want right away. And then I'm able to quickly process those candidates and move them forward if I need to.
And they weren't trying to hear any of that.
They weren't trying to hear my methodology. They just assumed this other person was a top recruiter, so I had to show them.
And why would they hire you in the first place if they didn't really want to hear what you...
Well, that's once you start working within the team. So the team that got built up, this was a special project, and I was working with the executive recruiting team at this time. The manager was a different manager than the people who brought me in.
Okay.
The people who brought me in were super high level. They weren't really down working on that kind of stuff. But working within those teams, which were all white recruiters, all their recruiting teams were all white.
Okay.
There was very few diverse recruiters, if any, and 0 diverse recruiting managers on top of that. So me being the minority, it's just difficult for them to take my perspective serious, so to speak. So,
gotcha. And so bouncing away from kind of like corporate America and stuff, do you feel like you were always meant to be like an entrepreneur?
I was always an entrepreneur from day one. I've always had my own business on top of doing like a 9-to-5 job as well.
Yeah.
So that W-2 income with my own business as well.
And can we talk about like My 7-on-7 and the story about that? So first, can you describe like what My 7-on-7 is, and then how where it started, and then how kind of like where it's at today?
For sure. So My 7-on-7 is the premium touch football league in America. We are growing rapidly. I'm super excited. We're in year 8, going into our 9th year. Started this, from nothing. Back when CTE was prevalent, some of the NFL players, I think Junior Seau killed himself due to kind of CTE, brain injuries. NFL was being sued. Will Smith came out with the movie Concussion. There was just moms were freaking out across America. Oh, my kid's never playing tackle football. Tackle football numbers were declining across the U.S. tremendously. So I was like, what can we do to keep these kids in the sport of football? You being one of them. You were like, no, Dad, I don't want to play tackle football. And you, Tanner, some of your buddies in that grade. And I was like, let's do this league to kind of keep kids engaged in football. It's non-contact. It's safe. There's no hitting. There's no tackling, but it's just skill development. Yeah. Remember, we were in the gym, me, Tanner, you, the quarterbacks, we're all in the gym out at East Ridge throwing the ball. And that was the beginning of My 7-on-7.
Yeah.
Then, we did it in the spring. That was winter. We did it in the spring. I thought I'd get 40, 50 kids out there, and we wind up getting 150 right away.
And can you talk about how like you first brought the idea of my 717 to like Eastridge like board,
Yep.
and then
For sure, for sure. So I was on the board. I was one of the directors on the board. I had been on the board for 8 years, building up the program, coaching, camps, everything. It was a passion of mine. We lived in the community. We were close knit with the community members. So I brought this idea to the board, saying, "Hey, let's do this through Eastridge and see how I think this could help us." But they voted. They rejected my idea. They stated things like, "Oh, it's not consistent with our mission. It actually take numbers away from tackle programs, which actually does the opposite." But I heard a lot of different reasons why they didn't want to do it, and thank you guys. I appreciate you for rejecting me.
believing.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because there were some people in the community that did believe in my vision and what I was doing. I still kind of talk to those people today, and they, even some that I don't talk to, they've reached out recently and said, "You were always right. Your vision was on point with the direction football is going with the modified version of football."
Yeah.
So year one, we got 150. Thank goodness I just did it on my own. I just went to community ed and just started it on my own. In year two, we got over 200 kids.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I knew I had something. So I started building the scale. And no, year one, we had 150. Year two, we had 400 kids.
400 that year
Yeah,
too.
so growth was tremendous.
Yeah.
Like we were on a 125% growth rate because it went from that one location to three to 8 to 16. Now we're all over the state of Minnesota, and we got 4 other states that have leagues in now. So
Nice.
the growth has been tremendous. This past year, we had a lot of internal growth. So in order for us to take over and really expand across the U.S., I had to do internal growth by hiring a core structure of leadership to kind of build this thing out and really take it to the next level. So
Yeah, because you were kind of doing most of the work yourself.
yes,
At a certain point, and there was only, I remember we were talking about like how there's certain work that only you can do in terms of getting like the community ed
Yep.
people and
Yep.
certain things like that. But can you talk about how like the offer for you to get bought out and stuff at?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So a company called Blue Star Innovation. Jerry Jones is a investment firm. I think his kids run it. There's another company called they changed their names. There's a company tied into that, multiple companies tied into that were part of this buyout agreement in Dallas, Texas. So I was in negotiating with them for about 8 months, and through that process, I realized that it helped me understand the value of my company. I had a buddy of mine, shout out to Quincy Avery in Atlanta. He's like, "Dude, your company's worth millions. Like, don't sell it." You know what I mean? And that kind of stuck with me. So I kind of went through the process, but always had my kind of ear to the street, ear to the ground, and kind of and really, I used to spend my own money and fly out there, sit with everybody, learn exactly what it is they're trying to do. And by doing that, I was able to get a better understanding of the business in other big companies like mine. So there's one in Southern California, Matt Leinart, that they were trying to buy as well as mine. And we're probably one of the 2 biggest companies in the U.S. as far as non-contact football, having thousands of kids and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I was like, if he's not selling, why am I selling?
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and I always felt weird. Like it was during the whole COVID time frame. And I was like,
Yeah.
they were buying up a bunch of little companies for super cheap during that time frame. And I'm like, is the value? So we did an EBITDA calculator on the value of my company. And I believe the growth rate that we had established wasn't in that calculation.
Yeah.
I feel like my company is worth way more, so we decided to decline the offer.
Yeah. You were like thinking about it though too, just because it was like peak COVID and stuff like that. But
Yeah, I thought about it. Yeah,
and the business was struggling and stuff like that too. And then I remember you were saying how you like there was internal restructuring. And can you talk about how like you did like the pop-up tournaments to kind of?
yes. So everybody was kind of taken aback by COVID.
Yeah.
So when COVID hit, it's kind of survival of the fittest. Like
Right.
who
In terms of entrepreneurs,
In
like,
terms of entrepreneurs,
all these businesses were going broke and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Everyone like
So
the number of businesses that were closing down and people were taking advantage of like the loans and stuff
Yep.
that were forgiven by the government.
PPP loans and all that. I
Yep.
got they gave us $7,000. I was like, what am I gonna do with this?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
I think I gave that to you and let you flip it. That was it. Like that was it. So I was like, we gave back 120K worth of refunds.
Yep.
Like 100% refunds to everybody who signed up. We just had to do it. And I was like, okay, we're going to set the ground as being like the moral, ethical company. We're not going to keep people's money. A competitor of ours kept people's money. So it made them look super bad. But we decided to give everybody full refunds. We're fine doing that because we knew our relationships with the communities are super close. And our relationships go from the community programs to the high school programs. So we wanted to make sure we didn't damage any relationship, regardless if we lost money on the back end. We're just going to do it anyway. So we did that. And then, I took a 2-week processing time to where I had to kind of figure out how do we overcome this situation, or how do we make something happen within the situation. And then came the pop-up tournaments, which was brilliant. Because we started doing pop-ups everywhere, like little pop-up tournaments to where we wear masks, we clean the balls, we sanitize everything. We didn't have more than 40 people in a certain section or something. And there's all these stipulations to being outside and how you could operate. And we were able to create something within all those COVID stipulations, looking at the CDC, looking at the WHO, looking at the Minnesota government guidelines. So we were able to do that. And these pop-up tournaments were perfect because we go to Woodbury through a 1-day event, leave, go to Eden Prairie, do another one, go to Maple Grove, go to Spring Lake Park. Like, we were able to do these little pop-ups. And parents and we charged a lot. We charged $65.
And people were kind of just wanted to get out the house too.
Parents were throwing their kids out of the house to do these pop-up tournaments. The kids are at home bouncing off the walls. They've been in the house. They've been isolated. No school, no exercise. They were chomping at the bit to do these tournaments, even though they were kind of expensive, which they were because we had to cover all the losses and whatnot. So we were able to make it happen, and that helped sustain us until things got back rolling and kept us relevant at the same time until things kept rolling back. And then the leagues kicked off without a hitch after that. So, and then the high school league is what really blew us up when we did the high school league. So Minnesota football canceled everything. I was waiting on them to cancel too. I had my hand on the button waiting for them to cancel, and we started a fall high school league the very next day. And we had 350 kids, multiple programs across the state, awareness, media, every media channel came out to view us, kicked it off, went smooth. And then they did me another favor, and they reinstated the high school fall league and did a 6-game fall league after we had already did our spring 7-on-7 season, our fall 7-on-7 season. That guaranteed me they weren't going to do a league in the spring, and I was able to do a spring league on top of that as well.
So the high school leagues are intense too. Like, those are really and I think it's and I kind of admire that too. Like, just like when businesses like struggling, like it was peak COVID, like the whole entire season was canceled, like you had to refund hundreds of thousands of dollars to people, and then also getting a buyout offer on top of that, and not taking the buyout offer and then coming up with a solution to do some stuff. Like, that just that's crazy.
And that was that was early part of our registration. So that was all the early registrants. We didn't even get to our peak season, so we usually get over like $400K worth of registration dollars, but we didn't even get that far. And then we just had to pivot. So me being a successful entrepreneur, being kind of growing up how I grew up, it was I'm gonna figure out a way. I just don't take no for an answer, and I just always figure out a way to make something happen. So
that's crazy.
It's been a fun ride. So, when I did go out to Dallas and speak to these companies, I realized how much more advanced my leagues were compared to other leagues as far as how our operations are set up, how our structure. Because I spent 8 years fine tuning exactly what a premium league experience would look like. And I just realized how much far along we are than most people. A lot of people have tried to do leagues, but they've been unsuccessful. A lot of big companies with money, way more money than we have, they don't know how to figure it out. We have like the secret sauce to it. So I had to kind of maintain that and kind of hold information back because I didn't want to give them all the information without having a deal on the table that I would accept.
Yeah. I think there's some kind of unique about what you do, though. Like, there's not really anyone in your position who can kind of do what you do with your background in terms of like hiring. Like, even right now when you're kind of building your core team to kind of make the business run on autopilot, like, no one really has your background in terms of being able to hire the right people. Because I've never seen like I've never seen someone like just have the abundance mindset of just being like, okay, if you can't do it, someone else will. In terms of like the loan stuff, like we're talking about, like I'm trying to get, a loan on a property right now, and you're just like, I remember the first time, we got the loan on the thing, it was like a list of just like 20, 30 lenders, and we just email them all, and you're like, whoever replies the quickest, go with them. And then if they don't work out, find someone else who will do what you want them to do. And I think that's kind of like, you kind of applied the same thing in like terms of your business, where it's like, if someone doesn't work out, just replace them until you find someone who kind of works.
Yeah. Or, make them do what you want them to do. Like I had to do it with my apartment building. So when I bought the apartment building.
Oh yeah. We didn't even talk about this. So first, for context, you got your first rental property, which is a quadruplex.
Yep.
In St. Paul.
Yeah. So when I went to purchase that, they're like, you're not going to be able to do owner occupied. You're not going to be able to do, FHA loan.
Yep.
They're like, you're going to have to put 20% down. I'm like, well, no, we're going to do FHA loan. No, we're going to do it. So let's loan officer, let's fill out the application. Let's do the process. And boom, sure enough, I got it. Yep. Boom. Sure enough, I was able to do it for the property, and it worked out. Now it's a, high cash flow, great property. It's maxed out the rents, it's doing well. It's just going to sit there and make money now. So, and that's kind of my mindset with everything that I do. Like, I don't necessarily take no for an answer. Like, these people work for you at the end of the day. Like, make them work. They may say they come across as if they know everything, but I've always done my due diligence on the backside. I've always read books. I've always, especially when it relates to me making money. That's how I read books. I don't read for pleasure at all. I read to mitigate risk. The more information you have to mitigate risk on your deals and how you analyze property and how you look at things, like, that's why I read. Yeah. So I don't get tricked. So, you know what I mean? So that's why I have an understanding, and I don't let on to how much I know. But I know things can be done. So when they're saying they want to go the easy route, a route that makes them money, I'm able to push back on that and say, no, we're going to go this route. I know it's a little bit more work for you and you don't want to do it, but you're going to do it. So, yeah. Yeah.
And, the first rental property you got was like a kind of killer deal. But can you talk about like your process of going about getting that? 'Cause you've claimed that you have like the best property analyst skills out here. So
this goes back just to my personal traits, how I am as an individual and how detailed I am, and things that I look at that, to honestly, it's street smarts. You know what I mean? It comes from my upbringing, being able to see angles and understand, variables very well. How will this thing play out realistically, type thing. So it just kind of comes a combination of that, the book smarts and analyzing and reading and understanding different angles. I'm not taking what everybody tells me. I'm not taking it to heart. I'm taking bits and pieces and saying, okay, what works for my situation? And then I apply it based on what I want to do. Is really how I do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, analyzing those properties, I'm looking at 10 to 20 different property analyst strategies or property calculators, and plugging in different numbers and finding different tax information that other people aren't looking for to plug in to make the most realistic sense, so I get a more realistic cap rate when I make a decision.
Yeah.
There's still always a little risk either way, but the more information you have, the more you can mitigate any risk.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, the more you know, the less there is to worry about. And I think too, like with rental properties, can you talk about like your strategy in terms of like long term, like how you see like what's like your ideal number of like rental properties? Because you've talked about like the 4-3-2-1.
Yep.
And why particularly that versus like even going up to like more than 4 units?
Well, that was my initial. So based on all the information I read, my initial thoughts on everything and how I was understanding the real estate game and how it fits with what I want to do, that was a way for me to control it and learn from it at the same time. Now that I've done that with 2 properties, it's kind of like, okay, I gotta my knowledge has accelerated to a point to where I'm starting to look at more of syndication, corporate options, or do I still be patient and still do the house hack strategy, and then go ahead and stay with my initial plan, which is 4-3-2-1,
Yep.
and then buy something, a big corporate property,
Okay.
commercial property, I should
Commercial,
say.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's always been my game plan. And then after that, we keep growing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And flipping.
And when did you first start like even doing research on like rental properties? Was that because of me in the book, or
Yes.
was it actually?
That was
Okay.
because of you and the book. So when I saw you buy your first duplex, and I've always been interested in what you're doing, and I was kind of watching you, and I was like, my son was able to get his duplex, and I was like, okay, you introduced me to the book, and the book was fascinating. I think it was the ABCs of
It
real
was
estate.
Rental Property Investing by Brandon Turner.
Yeah.
In case
So
someone check it out.
shout out to Brandon Turner, but it was an interesting book, and it made a lot of sense to me. So I'm able to, unique characteristics again, I'm able to take information, process it, and apply it very quickly. That was the first book. I read like 3 or 4 more books after that,
Right.
to really, because one perception is one angle, one viewpoint. I need 3 or 4, and then I take my own and then apply it.
Yeah, I think
So-
that's really what kind of separates successful investors from unsuccessful ones, is like people who are able to take something or take like what someone's telling them and be able to say that that's what works for them. It might not work for me, and then kind of take what they say as it is, and then kind of apply it to themselves. So that's real.
So what's the so there's another book by, what's it?
Kiyosaki,
Big
yeah.
Pockets, bigger pockets,
yep.
little pockets, or
Yep.
what's the name of that company?
Yeah, biggerpockets.com. Yep.
Biggerpockets.com. So they had another book that I read where they break down all the different strategies that you can do when you go into real estate.
Yep.
They dumb it down and make it understandable, syndications, flips, long-term rentals. They break down every rental strategy so you can understand all these rental strategies and figure out which one makes sense to you. I would never do flips because I'm not in the construction business. I'm not handy at all.
Yeah.
You got to be somewhat handy to manage properties and flip properties and stuff. Like,
For sure.
I'm not that. So why would I even think about that type of business? So
But I think you could learn, I mean, if you like kind of wanted to too, because you even told me like you watch like what the people are doing when they come and
oh yeah,
do some construction work and stuff like that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's something that I've taken too, even with like the HVAC thing went out, and I was like watching how my friend was doing it and like how to even like read the lights and stuff like that. So
I do that, one, to protect the investment. So what one contractor's doing, and if I hire a different one that's cheaper, I know that they're doing it right. You know what I mean? So it helps me say, oh no, it doesn't cost that much to do this.
do something.
This is this. You know what I mean? So
Gotcha.
I do, for the multiple reasons. So to learn, and then also to be able to confirm what I'm seeing and what people are doing.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah. And yeah, that's a good point. Let's think what else. What else do I want to talk about? I had like so many things I want to talk about. Let me think.
shoot away.
All right. So I'm gonna cut here. So going back to like kind of childhood, how do you take what you? Well, hold on. Let me think. I want to talk about like your childhood growing up, and then kind of what you applied from. Yeah, I don't even know like what to ask. Let me think.
Well, my childhood was different.
Yeah.
Like,
Can you tell me about your childhood growing up and like
Yeah.
kind of like your parental situation? Because like I have two grandmas, like Grandma Lee, Grandma Thomas, and like kind of how does that even work?
Yeah, so I can. Well, let me start at the beginning. So I grew up South Minneapolis. I lived with my mother. Me and my brother lived with my mother when I was little. So as far as back, we were like maybe 1 and 3 or something like that. We got taken from my mother, like child protection, and got put in a foster home. So she used to leave us in the apartment buildings by herself and go out or whatever, and we'd be eating out the trash can. So we had like rations on our mouths and stuff like that. So someone saw it, called someone. My grandmother saw it and got mad. Grandma Thomas, which is actually my grandmother.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
That's
so
crazy.
she made my dad fill out paperwork to get custody, and she kind of spearheaded the initiative to get custody of me and my brother when we were little. So technically, I was under my dad's care, but I grew up with my grandmother. So that's kind of how that started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So Grandma Thomas is my grandmother.
I didn't even know that. That's
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
Okay. And so growing up, you had like what, 7 siblings?
I got 4 brothers, 2 sisters.
Yeah. And then can you talk about kind of like Uncle Marah and like your relationship with him growing up?
Yeah, so out of my brothers and sisters, so me and Uncle Marah, aka Nick Thomas, we were the only ones that had the same mom and same dad.
Yeah.
Everyone else had different parents, different dads, different moms, or whatever it may be. But we were, same mom, same dad. We were the oldest of the siblings as well. My parents had me when they were 15 and 16, so they were super young.
Wow.
So they didn't know how to take care of us either. So that's half the battle right there. So I went to stay with my grandmother. We both did. Went to high school together. My brother, I took care of him. After 16, we're on our own. So I was taking care of my brother for the most part over at the Boston Terrace. I'll never forget the best year we had academically was my 11th grade year in his sophomore year, because we had food to eat, we had a stable place to live, and things of that nature. Didn't last very long. He ultimately went to live with my dad at some lady's house, and then I went back to my grandmother's house. So yeah.
Yeah. And when did he pass away?
He passed away about 12 years ago.
12 years ago. At what age was that?
I think he was, I want to say 30.
30?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he has he has kids of his own. A daughter, 3 sons that I try and keep track with. Try and keep, Nick, Tasia, Junga, Baraka.
Yeah.
So,
and then what was like his condition? Like how did that happen?
it's still somewhat a mystery, but the last information that I got is that he had some type of brain disease which caused him to have seizures. He had a seizure in his sleep, and he passed away because his tongue made him suffocate while he was sleeping. So it's due to some type of brain disease or something that no one detected or knew of until it was too late.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
And then growing up being like the oldest sibling, how has that? Do you think that was like a challenge as having to be like the role model for all your other siblings?
Yeah, it was difficult, super difficult. Mainly because I was authoritative, so I was kind of like the boss of the family. So everybody's perception of me is rude. You know what I mean? Like rude because I had to be. So it was cutthroat growing up in the hood in the cities. So I was the protector of the family. You know what I mean? I was I didn't let nobody mess with nothing. I was the enforcer as well. So, I had to be a certain way to survive.
For sure.
My Uncle Greg helped, raised me. My Uncle Lawrence helped raise me, kind of in the streets, so to speak. So that street smarts that I got, definitely comes from them. Without them, I probably wouldn't have made it. You know what I mean? To be honest, like I would have probably been dead or in jail. So my cousin Tyrese, we were on the same track. So through high school, we hung out together, and this is how fine of a line it is. So my cousin Tyrese, we're close in age. We hung out together. It just so happened that he went into a different direction and I went to another direction. So I went to college and he went to prison. So, and we hung around and did similar stuff. And it's just some of the one or two decisions kind of separated us from different paths in our lives. And he kind of stayed in the system and is still in the system today. And obviously I've been able to transcend corporate America, get married, make lots of money, do successful things, have a great family.
Yeah.
It's been a complete opposite situation. Kind of like the Westmore story.
I don't even know what the Westmore story is, but
it's a good book. You got to read it.
But okay, how does like what does it take to kind of because you're probably the most successful, growing up, you by far surpassed what would probably have been expected of you being from a situation like that. In terms of, I'm trying to find the correct way to ask this. How do you engage with people from your past who maybe weren't on the same trajectory as you, and you when you knew you wanted better for yourself, how did you separate yourself from them, and how yeah.
A lot of that I don't, you know what I mean? A lot of that you can't be in contact with those folks. And it's not just people I was friends with, it's my own family. You know what I mean? So my own family members, just because they grew up in poverty, they assume poverty is in their future. They only have certain level expectations. In order for me to even graduate college, so that's part of the reason it took me so long to graduate. I had family members down there engaged in different activity that was, not focused on graduating. So it took me cutting off people to get to where I wanted to get to. But you still love them. You just love at a distance. So, you gotta do what's right for you. I always knew that in the back of my head, it was okay, if I don't graduate, I can continue to help and support my family. But all I was doing was enabling them from getting established and doing things that they needed to do to build their future. And I stopped doing that. They didn't like it, but I had to do that in order to graduate, because I knew if I didn't graduate, I knew once I graduated and continued and been successful in my career, I can do way more for them now than I ever would in the past. I can help them find jobs. I can give them jobs. You know what I mean? I can help them navigate any level of interview that they want to be a part of. They don't necessarily seek that information from me, but it's there. You know what I mean? Right. I can help anybody way more now than I ever could.
Yeah. And I remember seeing a statistic on how when say the first black person in a family to go to college, they still remain in poverty because they help their family out and things of that nature. I think it's it takes something else to be able to really say focus on yourself first. It's kind of when an airplane's crashing, you got to put on your own air mask before you can help everybody else put on their own air mask, because you can't help anybody else if you're passed out.
That's fact. So yeah, I spoke to some kids over north, about how to make it in life, in general, how to be successful. This was when I was in corporate, so we can touch on that too. So my passion is with the youth and helping the youth, but one of the messages that I gave to them in my speech is that you're gonna have to cut off. So in the black community, we have this stigma about being down for your family. If one person is gonna starve, the other people have to starve with them. If they're gonna be broke, they have to be broke with them, and you have to struggle together. And that kind of, in a sense, is what brings people closer together, but it also keeps people in the same spot. They're not able to transcend and grow from where they're at and escape poverty and escape the situations that you're in. So one of my key messages to them was, you're going to have to cut some people off. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to hurt you and hurt them. But in order for you to achieve and move forward, you have to do it. And the message resonated with, maybe a couple of the kids, but that thing it's very hard to do, because we sometimes guilt trip our own people and say, oh, he's a sellout, oh, he's a do this, oh, he don't care about us. And we're notorious for doing that, even in my own family. My aunt, soon as my mother starts to progress and try to do something better for her life, she gets down talked into staying in the same mode as everybody else. So it's kind of, it's kind of weird, but I was able to, look past that and say, hey, you're going to be mad, but I'm going to have to cut you off so I can get this degree. I can go on and work in corporate America. I can learn more business knowledge and be able to create and have my own businesses one day and have, I could put people in homes now. Like, I can do a lot of different things now. So
what from your childhood have you taken to your kind of parenting style in raising me, Deontay, Taylon, Ashton, and things like that?
Well, I can tell you where I get my model from. My model comes from outside of my family. My family model is horrible. The way I was raised was horrible. Like, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. The trauma and the violence that I had to see growing up, like, no kid should be able to be in that environment. So my model comes from someone who I'm very close to, Mr. Ray Walton. His family structure, he's the example I took as how I want to raise my kids.
And what kind of things would he implement?
One characteristic in specifically that as his kids walked from the kitchen to the living room, he would always touch them and say he loved them, grab them by the shoulder, say he loved them. And that's something I always did. He had traditions where he would, all the family would get together on Thanksgiving and go see a movie together, or Christmas time, go see a movie together. And there was always some dedicated family time for people to share and show, just to talk. There was no expectations. There was no, oh, you get me a gift and do all this. It was just being by each other, type of thing.
And how does sports play a role in kind of like, because you've always coached like me, Taylon, Deontay in sports growing up.
Yep.
Like what kind of life lessons were you trying to instill in us through sports?
Exactly. So the life lessons in sports is the struggle. So the struggle comes from sports, because you don't really, I know you guys think it's tough, but it's not no real struggle in your family life, because you got a mom and a dad, they got working jobs, you got food on the table, you got clothes. Even in your podcast, when I heard you guys talking about the part you didn't like in the beginning, he's like, yeah, I had to do chores, and we had a corner house, and we had to pick the
weeds from
out,
in between the sidewalk.
But you're talking about living in a house on a corner lot. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, the perspective of it is so weird. And you're like, oh, he took our PS4, PS3 or whatever. Yeah. We didn't have none of that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
we did buy our own PlayStations, but
you know what I mean? Like, the perspective was different. You know what I mean? So, through sports is the struggle to overcome. So the life lessons, the struggle to overcome, like you specifically, like the racism we had to deal with.
In wrestling? Yeah, because wrestling is like a primarily white sport.
Correct. And there was an amount of fear that why you were in that. Like, we were in a room of thousands of people, and we're only black people in there. Literally. You know what I mean? Like, the world against us. You know how much character and strength that puts in you, that you know how much confidence I have that you can overcome anything this world has to throw at you because of that.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like a lot of that was like subconsciously implanted in me too. Like,
true.
Because I didn't know any of that at the time. But even when like our school blew up, and then you put me at Totino Grace with the best wrestlers from my weight class. Like they had the 2 winners of the state tournament at my weight class that year. Like even being in a room, and it was I was the only black dude even in the wrestling.
Maybe there was Totino Grace.
Totino Grace.
There was
maybe
one big guy.
Oh yeah, the one big black. Yep.
Yeah.
So out of like the 50 students, they had like another one guy. But yeah, yeah. I think even doing that, like that was that's like you got to really kind of. It's like for me, I kind of felt like I always was comfortable like in those environments because that's kind of all I knew though.
Yeah, and that's just one example. Like I also showed it by the way I acted in public. You know what I mean? Like,
can you elaborate on that?
So there'd be times, say we went to a restaurant or something, and they're like, "No, we don't have service for you after 9:40," and it'd be 9:50 or something. I don't know, like, or we can't get this for you, and I'd be like, you'd be watching me, and I'd be like,
I remember.
No, son, this is where you don't take no for an answer. You know what I mean? And I do something, and sure enough, I'd be like, okay, we don't talk to the workers. We go get the boss in the back.
Yep.
We bring him to the front, and we have a conversation with him.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And then we ultimately get what it is we deserve.
Yeah, I remember we were at like KFC. We were driving back from like Iowa or something, and like you were like, you wanted one of like the Apple things or something, or no, it wasn't. It was something else. I honestly completely forgot what it was. Yeah. But you were like, let me get the manager, and then the manager's like, oh, you want one of these Apple things while you're waiting and stuff, because they ran out of I think it was like the white meat. They have 2 types of meat, like light meat and dark meat or something, and they didn't have no dark meat, or I forgot what it was, but it was something very strange where they didn't have something that I don't even know what it was, but yeah, no, that's
I mean, either whatever it was. I was, there's principles. So we know they have it. They work there. They doing something. Or it could be a completely different situation. It could be in a store where they didn't have some products we were trying to get or something.
Right.
But I always showed you that
they might have it in the back or something.
Exactly.
And they
just accept what somebody tells you.
Ooh,
is the lesson.
That's the lesson.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
Never accept even if they look official and they're in the company and they're working in a suit and they come by and they say, oh, this is official, I'm telling you it's not here. And then most people, 90% of people, is take it and walk off. No, son. We say no. You go do what we need you to do.
That's hard.
Period. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's how I was training you as well. You picked up on you used to watch me. And then you used to laugh, you know what I mean? But I knew it was registering. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're like, okay, here goes that again. Like, especially when somebody's trying to tell me what I can't do and I'm spending my money at an establishment.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, it may come off arrogant or whatever, but it's principle to me. You know what I mean? It's life's lesson. So if you guys see me getting bullied, then you're going to grow up getting bullied.
Word.
You know what I mean? So that's where that comes from. But
that's real.
And then the sports, with Tay being my first son, I just tried, I really tried to instill him, and I had to learn with him through the process. But, we don't stand down. You know what I mean? We protect each other. We stand up for each other. You know what I mean? If you want something bad enough, you go out there and take it. You know what I'm saying? So that, like I've told you guys before, I create wolves, so we don't create sheep. You know what I mean? So it's different, but that could be, a harsh way to say it, but it is what it is.
Is there anything you wish you would have done different in raising us?
I mean, I can't go back and change nothing. I mean, everything happened for a reason, I'm super proud of where you guys, I don't really look back like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could look back at my own life and try and do a bunch of things different, but we just try and move forward and change. So I have an open mind as we move forward. I parent differently now than I did then. You know what I mean? So I'm more, now we're at the point of you guys are grown now. You're coming into your adulthood. So it's more of a relationship now. So how do we support each other? How do we all be bosses together? I have a real strong boss mentality. So how do we all be bosses together? How do we all achieve and support each other to create generational wealth under this Thomas brand? So everybody's affiliated with this Thomas brand now.
Right.
You know what I mean? So how do we establish ourselves as a family of power and wealth and tradition, and love, you know what I mean, going forward. So that's what it's all about to me.
Nice.
So
Cool. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the How to Be Rich podcast, rich in health, wealth, and everything else. Thanks, Dad, for hopping on.
appreciate you, son.
And we'll be back with another episode next week. Peace.